Bonnie, you've met Herman and King, I see.
Oh, I was hoping I met some soup.
For one evening, no doubt. But one needs time to prepare.
It doesn't take long to boil up a pair of tortoises, does it?
I meant for the loss.
What? They're pets, are they?
Well, they've kept the Major and myself company through some pretty lonely times. I got them from one of the village chiefs on my first trip out after Stanley's departure. He assumed I was a slaver, come to steal his wife and ransom her for food. He offered me these before I could put him straight. I couldn't speak much of the lingo then.
What was the wife like?
I didn't see her, but I'm sure she wouldn't have made into soup.
No, but she might have done for a pet. Then when you'd finished with her, you could have traded her in for the soup.
This is Herman because he reminds me of a German professor of zoology under whom I once studied. And this is King because he reminded the Major of the horse on which he was taught to ride as a child in Sussex. Where are your two companions, by the way?
Troops dealing with his Sudanese and Ward with his Zanzibaris.
You've got your men down already, have you? Good.
Oh, I didn't have charge of any men. As I'm the one with medical training, Mr. Stanley made me responsible for the mules.
Did they give you much trouble?
Let's say we only understood each other when I was having them fed.
In that respect, they don't seem too unlike the men.
A bit unlike your men, in that they were at least fed. I took a stroll around the compound after I'd done with the brutes. You're in a bad way here, aren't you? A very bad way. How many have you lost?
19 Zanzibaris, 12 Sudanese.
Well, you'll lose a few more tonight. Fever, ulcers on the back and legs, malnutrition, in other words. What have the poor devils been eating?
Much the same as the Major and myself. The odd fish they buy from the natives are a goat, sometimes a fowl, but the staple diet is the manioc root. For the Sudanese, that is, the Zanzibaris won't eat meat, so for them it's simply the odd fish and manioc and more manioc. Of course, they won't cook it properly. Manioc has to be boiled slowly and then drained. They toss it into the pot and swallow it straight down. It frequently swells in their stomachs.
Was it like this when Mr. Stanley was here?
Perhaps the Sudanese had a little more meat and the Zanzibaris a little more fish, as Mr. Stanley is famously clever at trading with the natives. But some of the Zanzibaris had begun to die before he left.
In other words, you've been having rather a grim time.
It's not particularly pleasant to watch men dying, Mr. Ward. They seem, the Zanzibaris especially, to settle into death before they become properly ill, as if death itself were the disease. They lie in their own dung, waiting. The flies come up. Well, you've seen and smelt for yourselves.
So, the fact of it is, they're dying of hunger and boredom.
In a sense, Mr. Ward, there doesn't quite catch the feeling of the 2 months they've spent doing it in.
And how many have died of a flogging?
1.
Ah, then there's been more than one flogging. I saw a creature out there whose back was in ribbons.
There have been several floggings, Mr. Ward. Once they realized they could trade their rifles for food, and once they started thieving, the Major began by issuing warnings, and when they didn't take, was forced to back them up with floggings.
Which doubtless haven't taken either.
An old debate, Mr. Ward. We have no way of knowing, have we, how many we've deterred? We only know how many haven't been. You blame us for it, then?
Good God, no. Now, once you start flogging, you have to go on, and nobody's yet discovered an alternative to starting. Oh, I can't really see there's anything here to surprise. Constant sickness, punctuated by regular floggings. The inevitable conditions of a large stationary camp in the Congo. Now, the only solution is to get moving as quickly as possible.
Amen to that. Ah, Mr. Troop.
It appears I'm not to get one after all. Can you believe it? It's not enough that we find Stanley gone, in spite of his reassurances that he'd waited us. It's not enough that we were misled on that, but it turns out that after weeks of hard travelling by day and the utmost misery and discomfort at night, I am still to be deprived. What the devil am I to do?
Oh, Mr. Troop is talking of a bed, Mr. Jemison.
A bed? But weren't you issued with a bed in London?
Oh, yes, Mr. Jefferson, I was issued with one. And here's my chit to prove it. You see, it entitles me to one bed at the expedition's expense. Now, when I met with Mr. Stanley at the Falls, I presented him with this chit signed by Mr. McKinnon of the committee, and he said that as all the beds were packed in the steamer, I'd have to wait until we met up here. Well, here I am, and here's my chit, but as there's no Stanley, there's no bed. Well, anyway, that'll teach me a little savvy. I saw a bed lying free on the wharf at the falls, but I refrained from taking it. And what happened? Old Ward here took it instead. Oh, he was quite right. By God, if I'd known the plight my scruples were to land me in, I'd have fought him for it. I would, you know, Ward.
Yes, old chap, I know. But look, there must be a spare bed somewhere in the camp. There always is.
Oh, yes. 3 spare beds. But according to the Major, they belong to Mr. Stanley and are on no account to be touched, according to the Major. Though why the devil he thinks Stanley would object,
Mr. Troop, I think I can help you. Mr. Park brought up an extra bed for Jeffson, who fortunately brought his own. Park asked me to add it to the loads for him, but he and I are good enough friends. I'm sure he wouldn't mind my letting you have the use of it.
What? What, you mean there is a bed? I shall have a bed tonight, you mean?
This very minute, if you like.
No. It's just that after sleeping on wet grass between damp blankets or propped against trees, I can hardly grasp. No, it's uncommonly kind of you, Mr. Jemison.
Ah, Mr. Troop and Mr. Ward, here you are. I've been looking for you. And Mr. Bonney. Door, John Henry, door. How many times do I have to tell you? We must be careful that your Sudanese, Mr. Troop, and your Zanzibaris, Mr. Ward, are kept separate from those already in the camp. We've had a bout of sickness, as you've probably noticed. And there's no point the freshmen being contaminated. They'll have to put guards on them or they'll drift. They'll drift. Mr. Bonney, your mules, a guard on those two, if you please. Mule meat is something of a delicacy with the Sudanese. With Mr. Jemison and myself, come to think of it, eh, Jamie? Well, gentlemen, by this time you'll have some idea of our situation. I've no doubt you're as disappointed to find Mr. Stanley gone as Mr. Jemison and I were when we were left behind to wait for you. But he was anxious to make all possible speed to Emin Pasha and pull him out before the Mahdi gets to him. And with luck, we'll either catch him up or not be too far behind him.
As I understand it, Major, we are to wait on for more porters.
Yes, Mr. Bonney, another 600. We have 900 loads, each one of which Mr. Stanley believes essential: food, quinine, rifles. And including the ones you brought up, just over 300 porters, so we can't move until we have the other 600.
Where are they going to come from?
They're being brought up by Tippu Tib.
Tippu Tib.
That's right, Mr. Ward, Tippu Tib. He and Mr. Stanley came to an arrangement here before Stanley set out.
Who is Tippu Tib?
He's an Arab slave trader. Well, half Arab, that is, and half Manuema, which makes him wholly abominable.
You know him, then?
Well, by reputation, of course. No one who spent any time in this part of the Congo could fail to. And I've come across his auxiliaries, who usually turn out to be his relatives as well. I've also come across his victims. I met poor Dean up at Stanley Falls a year ago, just after the Arabs had burnt him out.
But on that occasion, Tippu Tib wasn't the Arab responsible.
Tippu is always the Arab responsible. Well, this country is really his bazaar, you see, and the people in it his merchandise. And every Arab a relative, and every relative an agent.
Nevertheless, he and Mr. Stanley are the greatest of friends.
They both choose their friends wisely.
When is he expected, then, Major, with the porters?
Mr. Stanley couldn't be precise. He was hoping they'd arrive shortly after you.
Any day now, then.
Did you yourselves take part in these arrangements with Tippu Tib?
No. Mr. Stanley and Tippu Tib kept themselves to themselves during the time the Arabs were in the camp. None of the other officers had the pleasure of being introduced to him either. He has an aversion to any shows of white strength, apparently. We scarcely got a glimpse of him.
And this is the man we're to wait for. An Arab slaver who distrusts white men.
He doesn't distrust Mr. Stanley.
Have you heard anything of this Tippu Tib since he left?
Rumours. A couple of weeks ago, the natives were full of talk of Arabs. I went out to explore, but couldn't find any trace. But then, of course, the natives have a particular interest in Arabs. They fear them as slavers, but desire them as food.
What? No, I thought cannibalism had been wiped out in these parts by Stanley himself when he was here before. There was a long report in the Times only last year.
Well, the local chiefs probably haven't received their copies yet.
Very neat, Mr. Ward, very neat.
The problem is, Mr. Troop, it's hard to wipe out an appetite. Mr. Stanley made the chiefs promise to stop gobbling each other up.
As he made the slavers promise to give up slaving. A promise in the jungle may become a fact in London, but you surely don't believe that Tippu Tib is going to hire our 600 porters, do you? Or that Stanley believes he is? He'll enslave them, as he's always done.
Yes, but good God, Stanley told us nothing of this sort of thing in London. We signed on to march direct to the relief of Emin Pasha. And instead, here we are, hanging about, waiting for some brigand of an Arab to enslave some porters.
While outside there are cannibals and inside 300 hungry and contagious niggers. Exactly, Mr. Troop. That is our situation. And will remain our situation until Tippu Tib arrives to release us from it.
What is Mr. Stanley's alternative proposal?
Alternative to what?
In the event of Tippu's not turning up shortly. He's notorious for a number of things, but not for his punctuality. Or at least I've never heard of it.
There is no alternative.
But in the event of his not turning up at all?
There is still no alternative, Mr. Ward. Mr. Stanley will accept no alternative to the safe delivery of his loads.
But surely...
You'll be wanting to settle into your quarters. There's a shower behind my tent. The water comes up from the Aruwimi. It's dirty, warm, and it smells, I'm afraid, but it's wet.
We've been in the habit of eating at sundown, if that suits you. We've kept a goat, especially for this occasion, though we've been tempted by it often enough, eh, Jimmy? So at least this first night you'll have meat rather than manioc. Oh, by the way, an unnecessary warning, I'm sure, but anything you have in the way of provisions must be kept locked in your trunks. They're not about trying to slip into the tents. We caught one just the other day. And your rifles goes without saying.
Well, actually, Major, I have no provisions whatsoever, so I would be very glad to have what's coming to me as soon as you can manage it.
Yes, I'm right out of tea.
I'm sorry, Mr. Ward, there's nothing coming to you that I know of.
6 months' provisions guaranteed by the committee.
To be provided when we got our men up here.
I know nothing about it.
But they must surely have been left behind by Mr. Stanley.
Very possibly, Mr. Troop. But as Mr. Stanley left no instructions on the matter, there's no way of knowing.
What about you and Jameson? Have you had yours?
Mr. Stanley did give some out before he went, yes, but he left me no authorization to give you any.
My authorization comes from the committee in London.
Then perhaps you should take it up with the committee in London.
Well, personally, I shan't be needing jungle provisions in London. Anyway, my chit is signed by Mr. Stanley himself.
Then it is to Mr. Stanley you must apply when we catch up with him.
We need our provisions now, sir.
I can't help you, sir.
But you can, sir. They must be here amongst the loads Mr. Stanley left behind.
As Mr. Stanley didn't say, how can you know that?
Ratiocination, possibly. In that if Mr. Stanley owes us some provisions, which he does, and has left behind a large number of loads, which he has, and arranged for us to wait here with you to help bring up those loads, which he did, then he's scarcely likely to have taken our provisions on with him, which one can therefore conclude he hasn't.
Are you making fun of me, sir?
No, Major, I was simply helping you to a conclusion.
Well, one may conclude anything with Mr. Stanley as a sure way of ending up in the wrong for it, but one thing one can be sure about in the matter of Mr. Stanley's intentions is that his instructions are to be carried out to the very letter, and only to the very letter, however inconvenient that may be to the rest of the world. Mr. Jefferson will confirm that as commanding officer of this rear column, I must do as Mr. Stanley said, but I may on no account do what I think he might have said had he been here to say it. Isn't that so, Mr. Johnson? Oh, I sympathize with you, of course. And if my commanding officer were not Mr. Stanley, you would find your commanding officer a very much more obliging fellow, believe me.
Do you mean to say that we're not to have our provisions simply because Stanley forgot to include them in his instructions?
But we cannot say that he forgot. He may well have remembered not to include them.
And why should he do that?
I don't know. How should I?
You tell us that we're not to have provisions, which we were guaranteed as members of this expedition, provisions that do not belong personally to Mr. Stanley, Because in your view, Mr. Stanley is some sort of punctilious lunatic. Well, sir, let me remind you that I've had dealings with Mr. Stanley, and a saner and more practical man I've never met. Sir, I believe that you are making us the victims of some private misunderstanding between Mr. Stanley and yourself.
Have no fear of that, sir. There is no misunderstanding at all between Mr. Stanley and myself. I understand Mr. Stanley only too well. Certainly too well to allow myself to become the victim of your misfortune. He wouldn't hesitate to use this opportunity to ruin my career, my reputation at home.
Stanley will ruin your career and your reputation if you furnish us with provisions that are rightfully ours.
Ask Mr. Jefferson if I'm overstating the case.
The Major has reason to be careful where Mr. Stanley's orders are in question. Mr. Stanley on an expedition is a very different man from Mr. Stanley at the Falls or sitting with Mr. Mackinnon on the committee in London. Jefferson, Park, Stairs, all the officers who've gone on with him would concur.
And it is through his orders, some of them impossible to perform, that he gets at us. He's as savage with initiative as he is with inefficiency. Well, he'll not get at me, sir. Not anymore, and I'm sorry if others must suffer for it.
Can we see these orders, Major, as we're to be so strictly governed by them?
You would have seen them in due course, Mr. Troop, whether you'd requested to or not.
There's very little to them. He simply tells you to build a palisade, how many brass rods you're to pay the natives, and to wait for Tippu Tib to come up with the porters. I must say, if this is all...
No, it is not all. Or rather, it is all. And that's the damn subtlety of it. Not what he's put in, what he's left out.
Oh, this is the sheerest, the sheerest. How could he cover every contingency? Look! You tell us that Stanley always gets at you through his orders. Well, surely you examined him when he took you through them.
I did not.
Why not?
Perhaps, Mr. Troop, because he didn't take me through them.
Well, that is irregular, I admit, but then he's not a military man. But you could have gone to him yourself. I suppose you read them before he left.
You suppose incorrectly. Mr. Stanley made it impossible, quite impossible for me to read them until he'd marched out of the camp.
But the fact remains there is nothing there to prevent you giving us our provisions. Good God, man! Can you not see I have 2 ounces of sugar, an ounce of tea? Mr. Ward tells you he has nothing. Mr. Bonney is out of...
Only tea.
And the only reason you offer for denying us is that Stanley hasn't actually written it down that you should give us them, as if he didn't have enough on his mind.
Mr. Stanley's last verbal order to be delivered before Jefferson and Stairs as witnesses was that I was on no account to exceed his written orders. On no account!
You were on no account to exceed written orders that he prevented you from reading until he'd gone.
This is a trivial subject, sir, trivial. There are more important matters. Look outside, sir, at the state of the niggers he's left us with. He made sure to take only the healthy with him, don't doubt that. There, sickness, pilfering, and you fretted me about your tea and sugar. I've said my last word on the subject, sir. The subject is closed.
Well, it is not closed as far as I'm concerned.
Lord John Henry.
I have no intention. No intention.
Mr. Troop,
What?
your bed. Shall we go and find it?
Yes. Yes, the bed. At least I have a bed. I'm much obliged to you, Mr. Jemison.
I remember a governess, rather similar to the Major. Her most infuriating prohibitions always depended upon some illogically spiteful but unuttered edict of my father's. But it's no use blaming me. It's your papa says no. But he hasn't said no. No, but he would if you asked him. In fact, our papa didn't have the slightest interest in us and would have said yes to anything. Did you have a governess like that, Bonnie?
No. But this governess will say yes, don't you worry.
No, really? And what makes you think that?
Mr. Jemison's face.
I see, and that's why you kept the peace, was it? Because you'd read Mr. Jemson's face?
Well, it was no good going on at him, was it? Just made him more determined.
And did you like him for that?
I didn't like him or dislike him. I recognised him for what he is.
And what is that?
Our commanding officer.
Door, Bonnie, door. Oh, you bedded old troop, then?
Yes.
I was just admiring your work. Well, it is yours, I take it.
Yes.
This is a plover, isn't it?
Yes. He rested 10 minutes on a branch right outside my tent this morning. I shall find it hard to do full justice to his colouring. The forehead's light brown, reddish brown, really, and the crest is blacker than I've managed with charcoal. So is the top of the head. And the cheeks are a delicate grey, as is the lower half of the throat. The whiteness of the paper is about right for the whiteness of the rest of the throat, but the wing crests are a wonderful ash green. And no paper would serve for the white bar across the centre of the wing. And the eye, imagine an ochre iris around the black pupil.
Well, that collection in one of the small huts, that's entirely yours, is it?
Oh, yes, it is.
God, I thought it had been done by 4 men at least. A lepidopterist, an ornithologist, an entomologist, and an ethnologist. What unified them must be the artist.
Or perhaps a dilettante who separates them. Do you sketch, Mr. Ward?
Oh, a little. Which is how I do most things. So, I am the dilettante, Mr. Jemson, and now you've come face to face with a real article, you'll have to drop your pose. Unless, of course, it's assumed for the Major's sake.
Major Bartolot and I have been together in rather difficult circumstances recently. We've had to depend on each other too much, in sickness and in health, to assume poses with each other.
Good heavens. That sounds rather like a marriage.
I already have a marriage.
Really? And children?
2. At least I trust and pray 2. The second was due last month.
Well, may I congratulate you, not least on your wife, who must be very understanding.
She is, Mr. Ward. Thank you.
Well, whatever you say about Stanley, his recruitment drive in London was a spectacular success. Why, they said at the Falls he'd actually got some rich nincompoop to pay for the privilege of marching with him. God knows how much.
£1,000, Mr. Ward. And in view of what I've learnt so far, I count it a bargain as well as a privilege. And what about you? What are you here for?
Oh, I am a patriotic Englishman, Mr. Jemson.
I see.
And as Emin Pasha is an eccentric German, employed by the Egyptians to maintain their interests in South Equatorial Africa, it is surely the duty of all patriotic Englishmen to sign up with a Welsh adoptive American to rescue the eccentric German from a rampaging Muslim, isn't it?
So you don't believe the cause is noble?
Noble? There are no noble causes in the Congo, Mr. Jemson, and never have been. In the Congo, there are only cannibals and other natives, Arab slavers, European interests, and magnificent opportunists. Oh, along with birds, butterflies, snakes, and such like for artists and naturalists like yourself.
And what are you doing here?
I haven't the slightest idea. All I know is that after 3 years travelling round this continent, I was suddenly desperate for the sight of England. Nothing could have persuaded me to stay on for another month. Except, it seems, the very first opportunity to do so. Stanley's expedition was the very first opportunity. Perhaps it's merely the fickleness of the dilettante who decides to put up with something he's tired of for a change, eh?
Ah, and you're still here then. I was looking for Bonnie. As a matter of fact, thought I'd better find out if he brought up any quinine. He's not in his tent.
Well, he hasn't come in. He went off some time ago.
Oh.
He may be having a shower.
Look there. No one in the shower.
Oh, in that case, I'll be able to have one.
Oh, don't forget roast goat. Mr. Ward, roast goat and palm wine at sundown, eh? You've been having a chat with him, then?
Yes.
Ah. And what's he like when he's not drawling out his sarcasms?
Rather sympathetic, certainly intelligent.
You like him, then?
I found him rather a relief. I mean, from what I'd feared earlier.
Oh, God, Jimmy. I wish I had your knack. But by God, what a business, eh? Hardly arrived and they're set against me. Even Stanley couldn't have wished for a swifter success. Grown men at each other's throats, and over what? That's the joke of it. And that troop, dead set against me.
Oh, I expect now he's got a bed, he'll calm down.
What? Bed? How?
I remembered Parks. The one for Jeffson.
There you are. You see, I didn't think of it. Not at all. All I could think was he was after me for one of Stanley's beds, and now the bad feeling's there.
Major.
Ah, Bonnie, here you are. I've been looking for you.
Yes, one of the nigger boys only just told me, sir. I was talking to Troop in his tent.
What? Talking to Troop?
Yes, sir. I was just explaining that I am perfectly happy with the arrangements as they are.
Ah. Well, Bonnie, we'd better have a think about our medical supplies, eh?
I'll see you at mess.
Yes, right, Jamie, at mess. Yes, first thing is to make sure we keep our supplies separate from Stanley's. And that reminds me, here's a... As you're desperate, not much, I'm afraid. Nearly at an end myself, but enough to make a pot at least.
That's very kind of you, sir.
Not at all, not at all. Now, there's one other matter I need your advice on. I've been ill.
Yes, Mr. Jemison mentioned that you and he...
This is something different, something a medic can't spot. I don't sleep at nights. Not for months, not since Stanley left. I get the shakes, the fever, nightmares, that sort of thing, and I can't... Well, I find my temper scarcely seems to be mine, as if... Oh, how to explain it? As if I were being poisoned, you see.
Well, you probably are, Major. From what Mr. Jemison was telling me of your diet here.
Oh, no, it's not the diet. Jemison sleeps like a top most nights. He has the same diet. These nightmares, I tell you, and headaches. I can't go on with them. Well, what do you...
Morphine, sir.
Morphine? Certainly not. Morphine's not the answer.
No, Major, it isn't. The answer is obvious enough. A return to a different life, different country, different food. In other words, the answer for you is England. But as that answer's out of the question...
Why?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Why is it out of the question?
Well, because you're in command here, sir.
It might be better for everybody if I weren't. Mr. Jemison is more fit.
But Mr. Jemison isn't an army man, though, is he, sir? He's a gentleman of leisure, from what I can make out.
Mr. Jemison happens to be the finest man I've ever met.
But Mr. Stanley appointed you the commanding officer.
But between you and Troop and Ward and Mr. Jemison, you could. You understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do.
Well, then, man.
I'm not sure my recommendation would carry much weight.
But you would write one for me?
Oh, naturally, sir. If you ordered me to.
Ordered you to? Good God, man, what value would a recommendation have that I'd ordered you to write? You have qualifications, you can judge a situation and act accordingly. No one would challenge a doctor's findings.
That's true, sir, but then I'm not a doctor.
Not a doctor?
I am a medical orderly, and that's less than third class in the medical profession. You took me for a doctor.
I didn't think about it one way or another. I just assumed it. Well, in that case, we've been at cross purposes, haven't we?
No, sir. Well, at least I understood.
What? What did you understand?
Well, that you wanted my assurance, in as much as I can give it, that you are fit to carry on.
You want me to stay, do you?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, because you're the commanding officer.
You'll do for me, Bonnie. You'll do for me very well.
Thank you, Major.
You'll do for me, too, if I may say so.
Oh, sir, I shan't. Needless to say, it shall never be mentioned by me that this conversation took place. The others might misconstrue. And thank you again for the tea, Major. Much appreciated.
Damn. 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 Insolence! John Henry! John Henry! John Henry! Oh, Jimmy, hey, well then. Well, supper, eh? Manioc soup, prime cuts of manioc, pudding of manioc.
Not tonight, old man. Can't you smell the goat?
What? My God, yes. Goat, eh? How did you... Oh, those others, they've arrived. It's for them. What? Ah, there's a good boy, John Henry. I tell him to sit down, not on the floor like a monkey, but at the table like a human being. And then when you just set on, eh? That's a good lad, John Henry. You can get palm wine. Palm wine. Well, fancy that. Falling asleep. Nice sleep. A dream, not a nightmare. I've got a feeling the old Peter was in it. As we were walking across to the paddocks, spring morning, smelt something good. Oh, perhaps it was the goat, eh? Well, now I'm back. They'll be here in a minute.
Look, something's occurred to me that may help. What do you say to giving them half their 6 months' provisions now, and leave it to Stanley to give them their other half when we get up with him? That way you'll be recognizing their claim while still respecting Stanley's ultimate authority, do you see?
I don't know, Jamie, I don't know. All I know is I'm well and truly in Stanley's web, and whatever I do... Well, I'll have to think. Make a decision. Ah, Mr. Troop, you have a bed, I hear. Thank God for that, eh? And here's the palm wine on the table. There's the boy. Now the glasses. Ah, and here you are then, Ward, showered, and one for Mr. Ward, too, John Henry. Now the jug. Yeah, careful you don't spill. We've precious little left. Old Jemison bought it from the cannibals, so you see they have their uses, Troop. Eh? Not brandy, I know, but not as fierce as you might expect from a cannibal brew.
Sir.
Ah, Bonnie. Mr. Bonnie first, John Henry. That's right. There's a boy. And now mine. John Henry's quite a little find of mine. Used to be one of Mr. Stanley's boys, eh, John Henry? He was in the tent the morning Stanley was leaving. Stanley's tent! All the hullabaloo and John Henry crying, weren't you, John Henry? Because Stanley had chosen to take one of the other boys instead. Heartbroken because of it, eh, John Henry? And when Stanley marched out of the camp, oh, by God, what a business he makes of it. Struts yards ahead of his officers, poor old Jeffson, in a terrible state of indecision, whether to keep him company or maintain a respectful 10 yards behind. Park and stairs, trying to look unconcerned at the back, but getting tangled up with all the Zanzibaris who wouldn't move fast enough for all that damned fuss, drums rolling, pipes blowing, and all the time Stanley, unable to see the farce of it all. Strutting along, eyes focused on posterity by way of the London Times and his publishers. Jefferson did a marvellous sketch. One of the Zanzibaris he left behind for us to bury managed to die just as Stanley passed him. Oh, Jefferson got him in the sketch. What was it you called it? A faithful Zanzibari says his last farewell to H.M. Stanley, Esquire. H.M. standing for His Majesty, not Henry Morton, by God. And on the top of it, you put, homage to a great man. Huh? Little John Henry was trailing along behind, blubbering away, hoping right to the end that His Majesty would pardon him and take him along after all. I knew he wouldn't. I knew he'd send him back next morning. Next morning, I kept a lookout for him, found him skulking among the Sudanese and took him on. After a shower, of course. And now John Henry has a shower once a day, don't you, John Henry? And is my personal boy. Sleeps outside my tent. Tell them how Mr. Stanley came by you, John Henry.
Tippu Tib. He give me Mr. Stanley.
That's right, our old friend Tippu Tib. Now tell us, John Henry, is Tippu Tib a good man? Good man?
Tippu Tib, good man.
And is Tippu Tib bad man?
Bad man. Bad man.
Now tell us, John Henry, why is he called Tippu Tib? Why name Tippu Tib?
Tippu, 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 Tip, Tip, Tippu, Tip, Tippu, Tip.
Onomatopoeic, you see.
What?
The noise of the rifle when Tippu and his men come firing on the villages. Far more exact than bang, really.
Well, Tippu's real name is Hamed bin Mohammed El Majabi. But I never thought to ask why he was called Tippu Tib.
No, but Jameson did, eh, Jamie? Well, anyway, those are the three things that John Henry knows about Tippu Tib. That he's good, he's bad, and how he got his name.
Which is one thing more than we know about most people.
Oh, very neat, Mr. Ward, very neat.
Gentlemen, before you finish your glasses, may I propose a toast? To the rear column.
The rear column.
To the rear column.
I've been thinking, or rather, Johnson and I have been putting our heads together. What do you say to this? 3 months provisions now. 3 months when we catch up with Stanley. What do you say? Troop?
Well, sir, given your uneasiness with Mr. Stanley's orders, that seems fair enough.
Yes, it seems a reasonable compromise to me.
Certainly do for me, Major.
Very well, gentlemen. Yeah, John Henry. I have something to show you. Yeah. 1.5 pounds of coffee, 1 pound of tea, 1.5 tins of salt, 1.5 tins of jam and of chocolate milk, 1 tin of cocoa and milk, 1 tin of sardines and 1 of sausages, 1 pound of fancy biscuits, 1 tin of red herring, 1/2 pound of flour, 1/2 pound of sugar, 1 pot of Liebig, 1/4 pound of tapioca. Times 3, of course.
Oh, I see. This is a month's rations.
No, this is 3 months.
3 months?
That it is.
Good God, who made up these provisions?
Fortnum and Masons. They'd have done us quite nicely for an afternoon at Lord's cricket ground, don't you think?
Good God, good God.
So, there we are, gentlemen, 1/2 of what we've been quarrelling about. And now perhaps you'll understand something about Mr. Stanley, the greatest African explorer of our age. He has his expedition provisions made up by Fortnum and Masons. And now, if you'll excuse me while I put a stop to the accompaniment. Hey!
The Zanzibaris. The Major has a running battle with them every night. There's a particular couple, I call them Minships, because it's a Charles Dickens sounding name, and they're both out of Charles Dickens. He'd have set them in the Mile End Road. The husband's as lazy a vagabond as you could expect to meet. Lies on his side all day while the wife collects wood, bargains for food, gathers manioc. Then at night, after he's eaten, he retires to his tent and cleans his rifle while the wife plays for him on the drums. I think she starts all the others off, and she's always the last to stop. How now?
Woman, damn you! Woman, I warn you! Stop it, damn you!
48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. Take him down, will you? Take him down. Terebshe Yuli, Umshushu Shini. Take him down, Daniel!
Jameson's due back this morning, isn't he?
Is he?
What?
Well, you're not setting any store by that, are you?
Not setting store by it, no, just wanting to find out.
Well, you don't have to wait for him. I can tell you there are rumors as he knew before he left.
Well, there are rumors in the villages here. They may turn out to be facts further down.
They're always rumors, never facts.
But he thought these were worth following up.
Yes, of course he did, as they coincided with a distasteful duty.
I can't say I blame him. He is a gentleman, after all.
And the rest of us aren't, eh?
Oh, I only meant he's not an officer.
Well, some of us try to be both. Not that I blame him either if he can get away with it, but I wonder that Bartlett lets him. He wouldn't let me or Ward. It's a collective responsibility. We take votes on it. We should all stand by the decision.
But Jemison voted against, didn't he, this time?
This time, last time, and the time before.
Still, what would be the point of a vote if we all had to vote one way?
That's not my complaint.
What is your complaint?
Only that Jemison doesn't...
What?
It doesn't matter.
Water. Ward went over by 5. We had at 50 in the log. Damn nuisance. Jameson ought to be back by now. He likes to get in before the heat. God, what a business. Ward going over like that, I thought he'd never stop.
I still don't understand what your complaint is.
Doesn't matter.
What complaint?
About Mr. Jemison's absence, wasn't it?
What about his absence?
I was just saying that it was unfortunate that Jemison missed the flogging.
Why? Do you think he might have enjoyed it?
They're meant to be a joint responsibility. We're all supposed to stand by the majority decision.
And when has Jemison ever rejected the majority decision?
My point is simply that he should see it through with the rest of us.
He's seen enough of them to know how they go.
But he voted against and then stayed away.
And so?
Well, it's a way of keeping in the clear, isn't it?
Clear of what?
The responsibility, of course.
Oh, what are you talking about, Troop? Somebody had to go upriver to check the rumours.
And does that someone always have to be Jemison, and always when there's a flogging?
Jemison goes because he understands the lingo and is good with the natives, all right? All right?
But he'll bring back some sketches.
What?
I said
He'll bring back some nice sketches of birds and leaves and toads and butterflies and whatnot, I expect.
Let's hope he brings back some news of Tippu Tib, eh?
Yes, but whether he does or not, he'll bring back some sketches.
Well,
he's down in the loggers dissenting and down in the loggers absent from proceedings. In the 6 months I've been here, he has not supervised the flogging once.
In the 6 months you've been here, you've never stopped complaining to one of us about the rest of us, to the rest of us about one of us. If it's not the flogging, it's wood patrol. If it's not wood patrol, it's something else.
I'm sorry if I've given you cause for complaint, Troop.
You still haven't answered the facts, have you?
What facts?
I have done my turn on the floggings. Bonnie has done his, you've done yours, and so has Ward.
Done what?
Your turn on the floggings.
Overdone it, I think. Didn't I, this time?
By 5 strokes. What came over you, anyway?
Sorry. I, didn't keep count of my counting. Let's just hope he didn't either.
He couldn't. Not after the first 20, anyway. He wasn't conscious.
How very fortunate. After all, what would one do if he asked for the last 5 strokes to be taken back, eh? Anyway, I gave order for omission of 2 of his days in change. Hope that's all right.
What? No, it is not all right. You should have spoken to me first.
Yes. Well, sorry again. I felt as it was my mistake. I must make up in some way.
You made the mistake. It was not for you to make it up.
Well, what do you suggest we do, eh? Hey! Anyway, what difference does it make? 3 days or 5? He won't last the night, will he, Bonnie?
I shouldn't think so.
No, well, there, you see. Well, you all right, old man?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Better give him some quinine.
Is that all right, Major?
How are the stocks?
Beginning to run low.
Still, if a man's ill, he must have medicine.
Man can only have medicine if there's medicine to give him.
But it's no good making sure there's medicine to give him by not giving him any.
Very neat, Mr. Troop. Very
It
neat.
wasn't meant to be, because it's not funny if you think about it. If Bartolot starts refusing us medicine...
I'd never refuse when Bonnie says it's absolutely necessary. And nevertheless, the fact remains there soon won't be any medicine.
Oh, don't squabble over my health. I'm all right, I tell you. Just short on sleep, that's all. My tent isn't conducive to it. The glow from their fires throws up peculiar images, and their voices go on very shrill, and the whole effect... You know, it occurs to me, or at least it did occur to me when I counted at 23 strokes, or 24. I know, somewhere in that passage anyway, the 20s. It did occur to me that old Jemson's quite right. Oh, he usually is, you know. When he put forward the suggestion that we should abandon the flogging for a while. We really are losing them fast enough. And what's the current rate? 1 1/8 a day, Bonnie worked it out at, from sickness, starvation, etc., for us not to need to flog them to death, too.
It is the one matter on which Jemison is not right. If a nigger thieves or deserts or trades his rifle for food or sleeps on sentry duty, he is to be flogged. We have no choice.
But we do have a choice. If Jemison votes against and now Ward votes against, it only needs 1 more vote, and then what would you do?
I see. You intend to vote against you in future?
Or Bonnie might.
What, me? Of course I wouldn't.
Well,
If Troop votes against, I shall have to vote for. But I tell you what, Troop, shall we make a deal? Take it in turns to vote against. That way we honour the law and satisfy conscience. How many judges manage that? With the Major's permission, of course.
I don't give a damn what you do as long as discipline is maintained. If you all voted against, I'd enter it in the log and still have them flogged. And by God, order whichever of you I wanted to supervise it. And now we've cleared that up, I have work to do.
Work? What work?
He's counting the brass rods. He started in here last night. I was just going to bed. He came bursting in, didn't even notice me. Started pulling out the cases. Then at dawn, he was into the tent.
Well, it put him in a good humour for the flogging, didn't it? Saw him joking with a couple of Zanzibaris just before I begun the count. Oh, you were at his side, Bonnie, as you usually are. Was it a good joke?
It wasn't a joke. He was grinning at them.
Grinning at them?
He's discovered they're more frightened of him when he grins at them.
Really? Why, that might solve our problem. Instead of lashing a man to a post and having him flogged, we could lash him to a post and have Bartlott grin at him. 50, 55 times wouldn't make any difference.
Oh, yes, it would. They'd go off from fright even quicker.
They hate him.
They hate us all.
But they hate him most. And he goes out amongst them looking for trouble, poking at them with his damn stick as if trying to stir them up.
Perhaps that's what he's trying to do, stir them up to life. Hate might sustain them a day or two longer.
That's not why he does it. He does it because he hates them back.
So do I. When I see them lying about in the compound in their sickness as if they were the image of sickness itself. Or while they stand there, heads lolling, while I supervise one of them flogging another of them to death. That makes me hate them.
We can't go on. Week after week, something must be done.
What do you propose, Troop?
Well, simply that we do something, anything, to get on the move. Look here, Bonnie, this is confidential.
Yes, do be discreet, old chap. By the way, that woman I saw you with last night.
Woman? What woman?
I saw you in silhouette, tiptoeing past my tent.
And you were seeing things.
Yes, lots of things. You and the woman among them. But then you have a way with the ladies, don't you? Old Troop here was telling me the other day how you managed coming out on the boat. Now, you had to travel cabin class because you were at the expedition's expense. Isn't that right, old man? But before you were 3 days up... You did say 3 days, didn't you, Troop? You'd insinuated yourself among the ladies of first class by making free with little remedies for mal de mer and ended up dining between two absolute beauties, Troop called them, didn't you, Troop? At the captain's table, two absolute beauties.
Look here, Ward, I didn't intend any slight.
No, of course you didn't, old man. No, he was most complimentary about your gifts, Bonnie. No, he didn't end up at the captain's table between two absolute beauties, did you, Troop? Even though you went first class at your own expense. No, he was envious, you see, so really there's nothing to be ashamed of in taking a Zanzibari or Sudanese or native lady by the neck, eh? As long, of course, as there's no outraged husband.
Lift your arms. Swollen. You'd do better lying down.
No, I wouldn't.
If you don't lie down soon, you'll fall down later.
Right. I'll wait until then.
Then you're a fool. And that wasn't me or a woman you saw last night. It was your delirium.
Look, let's get back to what's important. Can I speak plainly?
Oh, plainly, Troop. Good God, you certainly can.
Look, I'm not advocating going behind Bartolot's back, but that we simply all have a reasoned and proper discussion.
Oh, he's here. Welcome back, old man.
Thank you. Troop, Bonnie, how are you?
Well, any news?
Ah, here you are, Jamie. You're back then. Thank God I was worried. Well, what news? What news?
Well, there was a great deal of excitement, more than usual. But the only significant thing was that in the Watuku village by the second river bend, where the chief wears those boots Stanley gave him.
Yes, what about it?
I know it doesn't sound much, but you see, he claimed he hadn't heard anything at all, not even a rumour.
It certainly doesn't sound much, other than there might be one honest nigger in the Congo after all.
No, my impression was the opposite. I couldn't be sure the other chiefs were telling the truth, but I was quite sure he wasn't. He knew something.
You mean you believe he's seen Tippu Tib?
Well, not quite that, but perhaps an Arab or two.
Oh, my God, that's something. That's something more than we've had this last 6 months.
But you're only guessing!
There was one small piece of evidence. Just outside his village, I came across the remains of a feast, a few bones.
An Arab feast?
Oh, no, quite distinctly a native feast, but an exceptional one. An Arab might have furnished it. But really, there was no way of knowing, because if it was an Arab, he was presumably in the belly of the chief who said there wasn't.
Digesting the evidence.
Yes, there were only a few digitals sucked clean and a couple of shin bones to go on. It could equally well have been a nigger from one of the other villages who'd come up too far. And the chief might well have been emphatic about there being no Arabs, as he didn't want a fuss over his meal. I can't say.
Nothing else?
No.
So we're no further ahead?
Not really, I'm sorry.
It's not your fault, man.
Still the bearer of no news.
Ah.
I say, you don't look at all well. Is your fever still running?
Oh, no, I'm much better, much.
That's good. Oh, by the way, I caught the most beautiful parakeet. I shall have to stuff him this evening. And look, these will amuse you. Yeah?
Ah, yes. Our Stanley-booted chief. Oh, I see what you mean. Embarrassed, but replete. Certainly a large illicit meal not far from his memory.
You better come and have a look at a Sudanese lying on the bank. Some sort of green bile coming out of his...
No! What are we going to do? Are we going to look at Jemisin's sketches? Or study 6 Sudanese we can't do anything for anyway? Or are we going to talk, to talk for once about what we're going to do? This situation can't go on, Bartolot, don't you see? You, Jemisin, surely you see. All we have to show for 6 months waiting for some 60 dead men is a loathsome story of shin bones and cannibalism. It is the last straw. But don't you see, we must act. We must act.
What action do you suggest we take?
Stanley can't possibly want us to linger on here.
I assure you he does.
Well, for how long? Another month, another 2 months? I mean, what use will we be to him then? He might already have reached Emin Pasha for all we know. He might even be dead. They might all of them have been massacred by the Mahdist.
Yes.
And meanwhile, we're to go on waiting.
Yes.
Rot among rotting niggers for no reason. Or wait for them to turn on us when we're in the middle of one of our floggings and tear us to pieces. Do you really think that's what Stanley would want? Tippu Tib's not coming. We all know it. There will be no 600 porters. There's nothing to wait here for.
Except one's honour.
Your honour, you mean? With Stanley. Oh, come, man, your silly feud with Stanley is 8 months past. He's long forgotten it if he's even alive, don't you see?
I see what you're proposing. It's desertion.
I'm proposing that we act with common sense. I tell you, Bartolot, whatever you may claim, Stanley is not a murdering maniac.
I never said he was.
The other day, you accused him of attempting to poison you.
Figure of speech, old chap.
No, but his attitude to Stanley is poisoning us. That's the point. Good God, man. Those orders of his you're so frightened of contravening were written on the supposition that Tippu would be here months ago. Stanley didn't even deal with the contingency that's arisen. He never expected it. We haven't the strength, nor the food, nor the medicine.
You've forgotten the brass rods.
What do you mean, we're running out of those too? Well, then we'll certainly have a rebellion to deal with. The only thing that the niggers look forward to is their brass rods.
We're not running out of them. Stanley left us enough to pay the men for another 6 months. Another 6 months, troop.
No, just a minute, old man. You've forgotten. We also have to pay Tippu's men on the march. He'd take that into account.
So did I. If Tippu's men had been paid since Stanley left, we would still have enough for another 6 months. As Tippu's men haven't arrived, we have enough for another 1.5 years. So there you are, troop. There's your evidence. Stanley acknowledges through the brass rods that we might have to wait and wait and wait.
What about the quinine? How do you explain that?
Perhaps he got Fortnum and Masons to package the quinine.
My experience of medical supplies, there are never enough of them, especially quinine.
Oh, no, I mean, this is all speculation. The fact of the matter is we don't know what Stanley intended. If only you'd found some way of getting him to take you through those damned orders. I still don't understand how it is you didn't get the chance. Did he refuse to let you read them before he left? What?
I really don't see the value of...
All right, troop, I'll tell you what happened. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction, that's what happened.
What satisfaction?
Of watching me read them. When I went to get them at his tent, he wasn't even dressed. That's how much... How much? He was just getting into those damned ridiculous togs he puts on specially for his marches. I had to stand there, while he crammed himself into those knickerbockers he wears for showing off his calves. And then his Norfolk jacket, which he thinks turns him into an English gentleman. And his German officer's cap, which he thinks turns him into a German officer. Not all the time strutting about gobbledygooking John Henry here, who was blubbering away. Gobbledygooking the Sudanese in Sudanese and the Zanzibaris in Zanzibari, or the other way round, for all I knew, to let me see the niggers were more important than his own senior officer. And sending messages to Jefferson, Park and Stairs, and in the middle of it all just shoved them into my hand and went on gobbledygooking. And when he saw that I just shoved them into my pocket and was going to go on standing there watching him with a smile, he was forced to come back to me, and by God, how he hates that. Standing eye to eye with another white man. Well, Major, not interested in your orders. I take it, I said, I take it they don't apply until you've left the camp, Mr. Stanley. Besides, there's really no need, sir, as they shall be carried out to the letter, whatever they are. But not beyond the letter or to your own letter or something like that, because I just turned on my heel and walked over here, letting him get on with his circus. So, now, Troop. Now you know why it was impossible and why I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I hope it's given you some, eh?
I can't believe it. You mean he actually invited you to read the orders? I can't believe it.
If you'll excuse the observation, old chap, one of your small weaknesses is that you can't believe what you clearly know to be true. It's far too human to be anything else, surely. You can believe it, can't you? If you try.
Do you really find all this amusing, Ward?
Well, yes. It's odd, I admit. I put it down to my temperature. Or temperament.
Well, because you didn't want Stanley to have the satisfaction, what it comes down to is this. We have no idea what to do next.
We wait.
For death?
In view of the brass rods, anything else would be desertion. That's what Stanley hopes for.
Well, actually, Major, the brass rods have nothing to do with anything at all. The perfectly simple and reasonable explanation for them came to me while you were describing with great vivacity, may I say, your last meeting with Stanley. And then I became so engrossed with the delightful interchanges between yourself and our good troop here that I quite forgot. And then you have such an assertive manner, do you see?
What are you talking about?
What?
This is fever, old man. Do go and lie down.
I warned him.
Nonsense, no, old boy. If you don't mind... the brass rods, yes. The reason Stanley left them behind. Yes. Well, it's because they're damned heavy, you see. Took as many with him as he calculated he'd need and left the rest behind for us to bring up with the porters. Which porters, what porters, entirely different question. But what would be the use of them if they weren't to bring up the brass rods among the other things, eh?
It's perfectly right, of course.
Well, of course! Oh, my dear Ward. Well, I mean, there you are, you see. The brass rods mean nothing. Surely you agree.
It's a possible explanation.
Well, now, can we discuss this in a different atmosphere? I have been partly to blame, I admit. We bring out the worst in each other at times, eh, Major?
But there's nothing to discuss. We wait. That's what we must do. For Tippu Tib, or for a message from Stanley, or for news that Stanley is dead. We wait.
No, I'm not going to wait. I'm going home. Now, who's coming with me? Ward, Jemison? You must see that this is madness. Come with me.
Mr. Stanley appointed me to stay with the Major. My place has been with him from the beginning.
There's no doubt that honour is involved somewhere, troop, old chap.
Yeah. I'm staying too, if you're interested, that is.
What?
It's probably the mate of that one I got a few days ago. We were just after a spot of shade and a drop of water, eh? Can't blame you for that. You all right?
All right. Well, yes. What does another snake or two matter in all this madness?
When will you be leaving us, Mr. Troop?
I can't go on my own. You know that.
One of us would accompany you, together with the soundest of the Sudanese. We won't let you end up in the belly of a Watu.
That's not what I meant. I stand by the majority decision.
We've each of us decided where our duty lies. If you think yours is to leave...
I'm staying.
In that case, Mr. Troop, perhaps you'll allow me to get on with my duty. Come along, let's have a look at that Sudanese. By God, Troop, by God! I shall put it in the log!
The log? What does he mean? We had a discussion. I stand by the majority decision. Does he mean I was proposing to desert? To abandon you and Stanley? He can't put that in the log. I shall write a letter to the committee in London, to Mr. William McKinnon himself, stating my position. I shall get it on record that there was never any question. Never.
I wonder who he thinks is going to deliver his letter. Or perhaps he'll ask for a majority decision to pop over with it himself to... what's the address? Somewhere in Cutter's Lane, Holborn, isn't it? Oh, my word. That is a magnificent specimen you've slaughtered there, Jemson. Far better than its wife, or husband, was it? You going to add it to your collection? Or have you got one already? How you sense these things, the way you moved. I thought you were going to strike down old Troop, the rest of us, all of us, single blow. While you were away, I've taken up sculpting again, but... fretfully. I tried to model Herman and King, but they would keep their heads in because of Bonnet's remarks about cooking them, you know. I was looking forward to showing you, but... it's rotten work. It's rotten work, I'm afraid.
You poor fellow. Here, get me. Get you to bed.
Not to my tent, if you please.
No, come.
Sorry. Sorry, Jepson. Did you know I went on to 55 and a fraction? Didn't matter, though. Bonnie says you'll die anyway.
Here, lie down.
Became a bit hypnotic, you see, telling the strokes, and then he got into a bit of a rhythm, you know. His arms sweeping back, and then forward, and then the screams, and then my voice, and his arms sweeping back, and then the screams stopped, and then my voice, and his arm, and my voice.
Must have been quite horrible for you.
No. It was quite pleasant. It was quite pleasant, don't you see? Could really have gone on and on. Why don't you do it, Jemson? Don't you enjoy it? Troop says Bartle lets you off. Is that true?
I supervised it once or twice before you other chaps came up.
And didn't you find it pleasant?
No, but I didn't have a fever when I did it. Perhaps that helps.
What about your wife and child? Children you pray and trust. It must be awful for them having you away when people count on you so much. I mean, if we need you here, she must need you there. Do you ever think about them? Do you, Jemson? Do you worry if they're all right?
Yes.
Yeah. I worry about you too, you know, when you're away. Oh, so does Bartlett. Oh, tramping about at top speed, kicking niggers, ordering floggings and grinning at them. Have you heard about his grinning? Worrying about you. He misses you, doesn't he?
You're really rather ill, you know. You should try and sleep.
No,
you must
sleep.
You must.
Well, you'll look in on me later, won't you?
Of course.
No, don't shut them, if you please.
Oh, I think so. They'll light their fire.
No, truly, I don't mind. I want the lights, please.
All right, I'll leave them half and half.
What worms? Good God.
Oh, no. Oh, it's only Jameson's snake.
Oh, be careful. Be careful, Jameson, and watch it.
Stop it, Daniel. Stop it.
No, Bartlett off on his rounds again. Having a go at Mrs. Minship.
Damn you, will you?
I say, old man, you've got it badly, eh?
You mustn't leave me again. You mustn't go away again.
No, old man, I'll sit by you. There we are, old man. That's better, isn't it? I'll be here. You'll be all right, eh? Not too good, eh?
No.
Jameson. Jameson, are you there?
Yes, right here.
You will stay, won't you?
Yes, I'll stay.
Here we are. Some quinine. Compliments of the Major.
Thank God for that.
Here we are, old man. Get this down, you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Jameson.
He's bad. Very bad. If he'd lain down at the beginning, somebody had better stay with him.
Yes, I'm going to.
No, I will.
No, it's all right.
The rest of us better leave him in peace.
Well, if you're sure.
Quite sure.
Right then. Good night, old man.
Good night.
Ah, you're all here then. How is he?
He's at the crisis. Jameson's going to sit with him. Good night, Major.
He's had the quinine then.
Yes.
Well, just you be careful, Jamie. We don't want you going out on us. We'll take it in turns.
No, I'll be all right.
Well, good night, old Jamie.
Good night, Edmund.
Jameson.
Yes.
Jameson, you there?
Yes. I'm here.
There she goes.
I can't hear her. Oh, yes. Still, she's very quiet tonight. Do you think they know? I mean, they might have felt something today from us, the way we've behaved. Well, she's beating very soft, and the others haven't joined in. How do you explain that?
Not by sentiment, anyway. The wonder is she can play at all, after what the Major did to her last night. Eh, Major?
Why does she do it anyway? What do you think, Jemison?
Oh, for the magic, I should think. As long as Mrs. Minchip plays, this sickness will stay off Mr. Minchip.
Well, it seems to work. They die around him, but every morning he's as fresh as black paint. Except for a few patches of red and blue from the Major's stick and boot, eh, Major?
Yes, well, it's really very reasonable. Mr. and Mrs. Minchip are evidently genuinely attached to each other. Her continuing to play the drums for him in spite of the Major's attempts to stop her only proves it to both of them, and so provides them with a reason for living.
Well, there you are, Major. You're part of their magic, too, eh?
What do you mean?
Well, you're helping to keep their marriage together, and it always takes magic. Are you going out to them?
No, not tonight. It would be wrong tonight.
They are very low. I tell you, they feel something of what we're feeling. There. She stopped altogether.
Gentlemen.
Well, here you are at last. What have you been up to, anyway?
Oh, my apologies for the delay. There's a little something I gave myself to in an idle kind of way during my convalescence, which I hesitate to present to public view. But I hope that my main contribution
Oh, my
well, will help to render the other more tolerable. True, old chap, if you would.
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Well, her own contribution to the evening has been so extreme that, however inadequately, she must be honoured. So, gentlemen, may I propose a toast?
Toast!
Oh, thank you, true, old chap.
Thanks, old boy.
To our tender and succulent benefactress. To dear old Nanny.
To dear old Nanny. Dear man, it's a real piece of work. Something really done. The mouth is wonderful, quite wonderful. The sardonic grin, the twist there of the lip, the very essence of goatiness.
The substance being somewhere else.
Well, I'm not thoroughly shamed by it, I admit.
The funny thing is,
I shall miss her.
Oh, that's charitable, Bonnie, considering the devil never stopped trying to kick you.
The devil's always trying to kick me in some manifestation or another.
Now that brandy has arrived, may I present my little...
Oh, Lord.
Lovely kind of
I'll hang on to the pipe a little longer. By God, it's good, Troop. Damn good. Thank you for it.
We all owe Troop thanks for it. He's sweetened the atmosphere around you.
What? Oh, yes. Very neat, Bonnie. Very neat.
Oh, by the way, there is something here I meant to show you. The personal column. If the gentleman who waited outside the Savoy on Friday of last week at the appointed hour should care to do so again this week, he will receive a full explanation and an assurance of...
And an assurance of what?
It stops there.
An assurance of nothing, then?
Or of everything.
14 months ago. Well, let's trust the matter's been settled between them, whatever it was.
Oh, no, it's obvious what it was. The writer is a lady, and the message is addressed to, well, gentlemen.
Go on, old man, give us the whole scene.
Well, it's a sacred tryst, what?
Yeah.
They meet, let's see now, they meet every Friday for a few precious moments. They don't touch, hardly speak, look into each other's eyes.
And what happened on that last Friday?
I'll tell you what. She has a fierce pater who's locked her in. And the gentleman in question's an officer, penniless but true, and planning something dashing, an elopement, what?
Mark my words, it's either money or the other thing.
Oh, Lord.
If it's the other thing, he didn't turn up because he's tired of waiting for it. If it's money, she's not giving him the other thing till she's got her hands on it.
How does that end?
Why, in the usual way, with an arrangement. The question is how that ends.
How does it usually end?
Why, if it's bad, in the law course. If it's worse, in church.
Careful, Bonnie, careful.
Why is that worse?
Because then it never ends.
But that song, Bonnie, the one you were humming in the shower. I believe you're a sentimentalist at heart, like all cynics.
What song?
Oh, just a song.
Sing it for us.
What?
Sing it for us. Come on, Bonnie.
Bonnie.
Oh, no, good God.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes.
'Tis years since last we met, and we may not meet again. I have struggled to forget, but the struggle was in vain. For her voice lives on the breeze, and her spirit comes at will. In the midnight on the sea, her bright smile haunts me still. For her voice lives on the breeze, and her spirit comes at will. In the midnight on the sea, her bright smile haunts me still. Every danger I have known that a reckless life can fill, yet her presence is not flown. Her bright smile haunts me still.
Gentlemen, to a young lady in Highgate.
To a young lady in Highgate. And to a young lady in Sussex.
To a young lady in Sussex.
To a young lady in Pimlico, another in Maidenhead, and a third in Greenwich.
No, Bonnie, only allowed one.
Oh, then I choose a young lady in Clapham.
Young lady in Clapham.
To them all. Plain and pretty, amiable and otherwise.
Oh.
The young, the old, the true, the false. So long as they be ladies.
Yeah.
No, you're worse than Bonnie. You've taken them all.
No, he hasn't. Only one. Pretty, amiable, young and true, on the way to the altar. Plain, false, old and otherwise, from there to the grave.
You go too far, Bonnie, too far. Remember, Mrs. Jameson.
Oh, good heavens, I can easily refute our Bonnie. by inviting you all to take dinner at my home this day a year hence. Mrs. Jemison and I and our children will be grateful for the chance to prove that what begins in church can continue ever more happily, please God. Will you come, all of you? Mrs. Jameson will be so pleased.
Mrs. Jameson.
Mrs. James.
Well, of course, 2 years hence, depending on circumstances known to us all.
That is a true interpretation to put on that message in the personal column.
What?
It's not from a lady at all. It's from some desperate fellow trying to do business with Mr. Tippu Tib, who is now outside the Savoy.
Or indeed inside it with his 600 porters turned waiters.
You know what? You know what my pater says? He says it's a funny old world, and he's right. Here we all are. Oh, we have our troubles and our worries. God knows Troop and I are a pretty peppery couple of fellows from time to time, eh? But here we are. And somewhere out there, Stanley. Please God, as Jamie said. And tonight, well, tonight my spirit's at peace with him. I'll never like him, I can't promise that, but tonight I can't help wishing the man safety. And an evening of fellowship like this one, eh?
Yeah.
And I'll wager he's wished us the same, eh? And I would like to endorse everything that the Major said. Whatever the hazards we are, we remain united. I mean, we forged a bond between us, which, speaking for myself, I know will last to the end of my life. I mean, I will look back on this Christmas together to the end of my life.
Amen to that.
Give us a carol, Bonnie. There's a chap. My heart yearns for one.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love sends to me a partridge in a pear tree. On the second day of Christmas, my true love sent to me 2 turtle doves and a partridge in a pear tree. On the third day of Christmas, my true love sent to me 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. On the fourth day of Christmas, my true love sent to me 4 collie birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree. On the fifth day of Christmas, my true love sends to me 5 gold rings, 4 collie birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Funny. They squat for hours without an expression till you laugh at them. And they always laugh back.
Yes, they have very pleasant dispositions. Unless, of course, she was laughing at you, or laughing at her. Who can say whether the man is playing with the cat or the cat with the man?
More like cattle than cats. Although she might have a game or two in her. Eh, my darling?
Could you, do you think, hold back on your wooing for a while? I prefer her to keep her head still. Besides, the days when you were the Lothario of Yambuya are over by some months, aren't they? Ever since our commanding officer delivered his en passant homily on what he'd do, by God, to any white man he caught, by God, etc., etc.
Why don't you join our commanding officer? He'd be glad of your company, I'm sure.
Where is he?
Having a word.
Who with?
A couple of Sudanese fell asleep on watch last night. Second provisions tent, I think it was. Some of Stanley's medical supplies are in there. So he should be lathering up nicely, or catch him at his climax if you run.
Anything missing?
Hmm?
Anything missing?
Well, why don't you scamper over and see for yourself? There's a good chap, eh?
John Henry.
John Henry!
Oh, do stop shouting, Bonnie. He won't come, at least not for you.
Well, he'd better for his sake. If the Major finds out he's forgotten the water... John Henry!
He's probably unconscious, you fool.
What?
Oh. Didn't you hear his screams?
No.
Really not? About midnight from his master's tent?
No.
Nor his master's bellows, stick and boot?
No.
How do you manage these slumbers of yours, eh? You seem to have found the secret that eludes everyone but the niggers on watch. When they're dying, of course.
Perhaps I've given up worrying.
But what have you taken up to give up worrying? Eh, Bonnie?
The thing about you, Ward, is you can't let up, can you? You set out to make him worse. The way you went on at him at mess, counting off the niggers who died or escaped this last month.
I was merely trying to engage his attention with a little mental arithmetic.
Yes, well, you left him in a proper state. And then banging your hand up and down to the drum. That's probably why he went off and battered John Henry.
And that's why you needn't concern yourself with his health. Don't types of your rank have to take the Hippocratic Oath, Bonnie?
Oh, shut up, Ward.
Well, you feel no professional obligations to minister to him.
What am I meant to do? He hasn't consulted me, has he?
And he won't. He's far too frightened of you.
Very funny, Ward.
You can have my next year's ration of goat if he's not.
You honestly mean to tell me that Bartolot's frightened of me?
Bartolot? Oh, good God, Bonnie. You'd better not go about confusing our commanding Major Bartolot with his battered little nigger of a serving boy. Oh, no. Get it clear in your head. They're fearfully distinct, you know. Now, the battered little nigger of a serving boy is the one who's frightened of you, even though he needs your skill and bandages. The commanding Major Bartlott is the one you're frightened of. And with good reason, as he's quite clearly mad. And now you have something to report to the Major. You'll hurry along, won't you, please, and report it?
You want me to tell him that you say he's mad, do you?
Yes, please.
Why?
So that I can tell him what you've started taking, to give up worrying. And then he'll have you flogged, I should think, and I'd quite enjoy that, wouldn't you?
I warn you, Ward. If you make trouble for me with Bartolot, I'll make a damn sight more back.
Ah, hello, old man. How are you? You really shouldn't be up, you know.
There you are, old chap. Bonnie's just made out his favourite prescription. Now, that should make you feel better.
I'll get you some.
No, you won't.
You're thirsty, aren't you?
Yes, but you won't get any water. You'll go out for it, but you won't come back with it.
What do you mean?
You know what he means. He means you'll go out for it, but you won't come back with it.
Because you haven't asked him, have you?
I haven't even seen him to speak to this morning.
No, but you're not going to ask him, are you?
Of course I am. I said I would. But I also said I didn't see the point because we all know what the answer's going to be.
What about you, Ward? Will you speak up for me?
Of course. But I won't do any good. Quite the reverse, I'm afraid.
I see. So I'm to die, then, is that it? To die without making a fuss?
Look, I don't think it's quite as bad as that.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. I'm weaker every time I come out of it. I shall die, all right. I've known it for days now. I shall die here in this place. Because a lunatic.
I say, be careful, old chap. The faithful Bonnie is at your side.
I don't care. I'm past caring. You tell him. I saw him, Bonnie. He didn't know I was watching, but I saw him from my tent flap. I saw the lunatic go out and...
Rotten fish! 2 rotting fish. That's all our husband thinks she is worth, smirking outside as if he were redeeming from a pawn shop. Come on, get up. Get up. He's brought you back with 2 rotting fish. Now, go on, get along with him. Wait. Here, take that. Tell him to choke on them himself. Go on, get on, you. Swears there isn't a goat to be had. He stinks like a goat himself. A morning wasted catching her for 2 rotting fish. Well, I got them to admit it at last. They'd been asleep all right. Thank God they hadn't got into the boxes. None of them were open. They're not cunning enough to put the lids back on. By God, if any of that medicine had been touched, Stanley would never have believed it was the niggers. Not with a chance like that. Troop, your place is in the tent. Did you hear anything last night?
I'm still ill, thank you for asking. Worse, as a matter of fact.
What?
Still ill, thank you for asking. Worse, as a matter of fact.
I'm talking to Troop, Ward.
I said I'm worse.
You're up, aren't you?
Oh, yes, I'm up, Bartolot.
Slept through the night, did you?
No, Bartolot, no sleep. None at all.
Loyal Bonnie did, though, didn't you, Bonnie? Slept like a top.
Well, then. Did you hear anything, see anything?
Oh, yes. I saw and heard quite a lot.
From the provisions tent?
No, not from there.
Well, Ward, what about you?
Screams, oaths and blows from your tent. From the provisions tent, nothing, so I'm afraid I can't help you either, sir.
We've got to find out who's responsible. There's a clutch of Sudanese scum who are up to some mischief.
How remarkable that anyone in the compound, apart from your energetic self, of course, could be up to anything as taxing as mischief.
But you're damn well not, are you? Just been idling about here all day. John Henry! John Henry! Where's that little...
Haven't seen hide nor hair of him, Major.
From which we can probably conclude he must still be out.
Out?
Of his senses. And after the kind of night you two had together, it's hardly to be wondered at, is it?
You drank the last drop of water, I suppose, Ward, but damn you if you were going to get some more for the rest of us.
Damn me if I was there. I'll get some, Major.
Thank you, Bonnie.
I was just about to get some for Troop anyway.
Bonnie, before you go, would you kindly ask the Major what you promised our troop here? You'd ask him.
What?
Bonnie, before you go, would you kindly
about
ask...
the quinine, Major. I've explained the situation being what it is.
No, the situation, Troop. You've known it for months. There isn't any.
Yes, there is.
But it's not ours, Troop. It's Stanley's. We've used up ours.
So I'm to die.
Not going to die.
Because the rest of you used up our stock before I could get ill. Is that what it comes to?
Yes, even you must find that a trifle bizarre, sir. The poor old troop's superior robustness has had such an unhappy effect upon his health.
What?
Yes, even you must find that a
God,
trifle bizarre.
Ward, how sick I am of your jokes!
Ah, but fortunately for you, you don't need quinine to recover from them.
But I do know how to stop you making them.
So do I, sir. Some humanity. Or failing that, a dash of intelligence in the running of this camp. Or did you mean bellow, stick and boot as usual?
You're just going to stand by then and see me die, are you, Bartolot? Well, my death shall be on your head. I've written to McKinnon. My letter to be conveyed to him with the rest of my effects. Ward, if you would be so good.
Of course, old chap.
Oh, all right, Troop. You can die if you want to. I've long wanted you gone. You've never had anything to give the rear column but bluster when you were well and snivelling. Now you're sick. It's not medicine you lack, Troop, but fortitude.
You refuse me, then?
Of course I refuse you.
And that is your last word?
I hope so, though knowing you...
Very well, Bartolot. I give you warning. I shall help myself from Stanley's supplies.
What did you say?
I shall help myself.
By God, you already have, haven't you? It was you in the provisions tent last night. It was you. I'm going to open every load, every one. And if there's a drop of quinine missing, By
By God, trooper, I'll have you flogged for the thieving nigger you are.
You're mad, Bartolo. A lunatic. A lunatic. I saw you last night. I watched you. I wrote it down. It's in my letter to McKinnon. Now, don't you forget my letter, Ward.
Certainly not, old man.
Everybody else will know you for what you are.
Ha, ha, ha.
Do you know what he did last night?
Oh, here you are. You're back then.
Listen to me. I've news. I've seen Tippu Tib.
You've seen?
Yes. He sends his greetings and his apologies for the delay. But he solemnly undertakes to be with us shortly with the porters. He swore it to Allah and in his friendship to Stanley. Apparently he lost his first catch through a series of monstrous misfortunes. Escaped sickness, capsizing boats. But he sent messengers to let us know, presumably they were the cannibal victims. But his second lot, with a large guard of his Arabs, are on their way. He's just had word he's going back to the falls to bring them up himself.
But about 3 weeks then?
His own calculation was a month.
By God. Of all the wonderful... What was he doing in these parts if his slaves were back at the falls?
Coming to see you. But I told him that as he'd seen me, you'd prefer him to get back to the porters.
By God, yes! And Stanley? Any news of Stanley?
He must be alive, as Tippu would have heard if he were dead. He's a rather extraordinary chap, our Tippu, by the way. You enjoy...
No, Stanley's alive. The porters are coming up. Can't be more than a month away. We'll meet him on the march, by God. With the loads. With the loads. How do you do, Mr. Stanley? Here are your supplies, sir. By God, we've beaten you, Stanley. Beaten you, sir.
So we'll be moving from this place after all. Is that what you mean, Jemison? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, old man, that's it.
But what about me? What's he going to do about me? I told him, you see. I let him know that I'd seen him. Oh, why did I? Why did I? Now he'll send me home to die in the jungle. Or leave me here to perish by myself while you march on. Anyway, I won't live without quinine, and he won't let me have any of Stanley's. Oh, yes, that's how he'll do it.
My dear old chap, there's no need of Stanley. I've got some. Here. I've always kept some of my personal stock in reserve for my expeditions in case I'm taken with a fever away from base. But I shan't need it now, shall I? Besides, I've never felt so well in my life.
Thank you, Jefferson. Thank you. God bless you, Jefferson. I'm sorry. Jefferson.
He ought to be in bed.
Well, why don't you put him there?
Yes, I'm sure you're the chap he needs.
Yes. Come on, old man. Let's get you down.
Well, you got back in the nick of time.
I've never moved so fast in my life. How are you?
I'm anxious to hear about your adventures. What sort of a chap is Tippu, after all?
Oh, very amusing. I kept storing away all sorts of things to tell you. He goes in for a grand, not to say flamboyant style of hospitality. I've done one or two sketches of him in characteristic postures I must show you later, by the way. Oh, I picked up a spectacular lizard and a butterfly I've never seen before. He fluttered over Tippu's head in my second morning and settled in a branch.
I'm afraid it's empty. John Henry being hors de combat. Let me get you some.
No, I'm not really thirsty. I stopped for a drink when I came in. I wasn't thirsty then either, but one gets into the habit of taking a drink where one can, as if it'll make up for all the times one can't, which of course it doesn't. But you haven't told me how you are.
All I can really say is that I'm no worse.
No worse?
Than the rest of us. I haven't been beating children senseless, for instance, but then that's the Major's way, not mine. Nor have I been stealing morphine from Stanley's medical supplies, but then that's Bonnie's way, as it turns out.
Ah, I did wonder before I left.
Troop's way you know about, as you caught him at the climax of his
Yes,
performance.
poor old Troop.
And for my part, I've mainly lolled.
Lolled?
About and about, you know. Inflaming the inflammable, goading the goadable, despising the despicable. That's been my way. What I'm trying to say is that, given our different forms of degeneration, you were quite right to lie about seeing Tippu Tib.
I didn't lie about seeing Tippu Tib. I spent 3 days in his camp.
Oh, I see. Then you lied about what he said.
I reported him absolutely faithfully.
But you can't have believed him.
Of course not. It was understood between us at once that his lies were a courtesy, so that I shouldn't feel obliged to accuse him of treachery when hopelessly outnumbered. As I said, he's an excellent host. I hoped you wouldn't be taken in. I shall need your support more than ever when the month is up and the doubts return. But if we can stretch the month into 2 and then 3... until Stanley comes back or we have news of his death, we have a chance. At least we'll survive until tomorrow. I say, would you like to have a look at my rendering of Tippu? I think I've caught something.
No. No, I wouldn't. Sorry, I know it's infernally weak of me. I admire you more than any man I've ever met. It's just that at the moment, I wish you hadn't... that's not fair. I wish I hadn't insisted on the truth.
John Henry. John Henry, come here. Where was Sawa? Well, you will be from now on, I promise you. No more bruises. Madonde Guisha. All right, now you go and find your master, eh?
All right, old boy, all right, Jimmy. Oh, it's only me, Jimmy.
I'm sorry.
Bad dream, eh?
Yeah.
And are you properly awake now?
I'm not sure.
Well, I've no dream, I can tell you. I've had them out on the march, up and down and around the compound, and then out into the jungle. John Henry, pour the palm wine. Pour the palm wine, John Henry. Tell you the truth, I could hardly keep still myself, thinking of his face, thinking of the expression on the devil's face when he finds every one of them intact, eh? Well, Mr. Stanley, and what sort of a year have you had?
let me tell you about ours. Oh, and here's our Mr. Jemison, and Mr. Bonney, and Mr. Ward, and even Mr. Troop. You do remember us, I take it. Or had you thought us dead, sir? Or deserted, even? By God, by God. There's a boy, John Henry. And keep off that bad leg, eh? Well, Jimmy. And what about Emin Pasha? I thought about him when we were marching him along. First time I've remembered him for nearly a year. Make a nonsense of the whole business if Stanley hasn't got him out. If the Mahdi got to him first, eh? All we've been through because of Emin Pasha. And none of it to do with him. Just a battle between Stanley and ourselves. Well, ourselves and the damn niggers. And ourselves and ourselves, eh? But I tell you something, he nearly won on me. He did. If you hadn't come back, God knows what Troop called me a lunatic, and by God, he's right, because last night I committed the act of a lunatic, and Troop saw me at it. It was your Mrs. Minchip drove me to it on her drums. I sent John Henry out, and they went silent, but then they started again, and I couldn't endure it. Couldn't endure it. Oh, but I did, you see. Instead of going out there and giving her a cuff myself, I endured it. Until the others had gone to bed, and then I went out. Walked over them. Trampled on them where they lay, or put my stick into their sides and stirred them out of the way with the point, walking in a straight line to their tent. When I got there, I went up to Mrs. Minchip squatting there, beating away, and I grinned at her. You know the way my grin works. A grin and then a cuff, how they fold before it. But this time, not a bit of it. She just kept pounding on, not even seeing me. And then I looked up, and there was his face in the slit of their tent, peering out and grinning back at me, and beneath that another slit, freshly cut, the barrel of his rifle sticking out straight at me, right at my chest, you see, and Mrs. Minchip pounding on. So I looked back at him, grinning at his grin to wipe it off, and I could see him losing his nerve, and the barrel wavered. So I bent over Mrs. Minchip, you see. I didn't know what I was doing until my teeth were in her neck. Sank them deep into her neck to stop her on the drums at last. I looked back at the slit, and I thought, now, you nigger, now, if you dare, with her blood around my mouth. And I laughed into his face with his woman's blood around my mouth and his gun against my chest. It was a good laugh, a good long laugh, and all the time I was thinking, now, nigger, do it, now. Until I turned and walked away, stepping on them again, on their arms and legs and bellies and faces. And when I got back to my tent, I remembered the blood was still around my mouth, and I licked at it with my tongue and licked it off with my tongue. Drank some palm wine to get rid of the taste, and then more palm wine to keep the dear old Patey, you see, from watching his son lick up nigger blood from around his mouth. Or Stanley seeing what I'd come to. And there was John Henry. And so he got the brunt of it, the poor little mite. Poor little mite. Oh, You see, I had to tell you myself before you hear it from Troop. Oh, Jimmy. What do you think of me now?
Why, exactly as I've always thought of you, old man.
Oh, well, that's a relief. I care what you think of me, you know, always have. You and your strength, oh, well, you know that. Oh, by God, you know, I may be the wrong man for the rear column. That's why he chose me. But one good thing I did right at the beginning, I had the beating of Stanley right at the beginning. When I made him give you over to me.
Give me over to you?
One of Park, Jeffson, or Stairs will remain behind with you, Bartlett, he said. You may choose. And I said, none of them, thank you, Mr. Stanley. The man for me is Jemison. So there, you see. If it hadn't been for me, you wouldn't have had to go through this past year. I never dared own up to before, but I probably wouldn't have today if...
Fate hadn't worked things otherwise.
That's it, old man, that's it.
But fate being fate never does. At least inasmuch as you've been mine and didn't.
All I can say is, in spite of everything, I wouldn't have had it different.
Amen to that.
Oh, Ronnie, there you are. Jefferson and I were just having a glass. John Henry, a glass for Mr. Bonnie. Ah, there she goes, there, Jamie. So, that's all right then. Well, they have something to celebrate tonight. John Henry, go out and tell them with the Major's compliments. Tonight they may play their drums, but low, tell them low.
Brought back some drawings too, eh?
Yes.
So, quite a successful trip, what with one thing and another. Any of Tippu Tib?
What? Oh, Tippu. I must have a look at there and get to know the devil on different terms, eh? By God, it'll be hard to keep a check on my tongue when he comes in here. How do you do, Mr. Tip? Glad to make your acquaintance, sir, at last. Ah, here you are, Ward. Come along and have a glass of Yambuya champagne. And I have good news. Fish stew tonight.
What?
Oh, it's all right, Bonnie. It's 3 I picked up downriver when I was marching the men, not that rotting pair from this morning. Jamie, you haven't heard about that yet. Bonnie and I caught ourselves a woman yesterday, hobbled her, brought her back here. Her man came in this morning with 2 stinking fish. Troop! By God, you've come here at last for Troop. But should you be up, old man, even for Yambuya champagne? Yeah, should you be?
Thank you, Major. I would like to say, in front of everybody, that I said some things earlier which I deeply regret. I accused you of all sorts of nonsense, which Bonnie tells me I realize was just delirium.
Oh, well, we have our what's past is past. Yeah, that's the thing. Let's drink to
Tippu Tib.
Yes, to Tippu Tib. Damn his soul.
Tippu Tib.
Damn his soul.
Oh.
I saw him here a moment ago. Yes, here he is.
Oh, let's see. Oh, yes, that's as good as your famous faithful Zanzibari, Jamie. What slyness, what pomp, eh? And that rifle, the one Stanley gave him across his chest.
What's this? A little girl tied to a tree.
Oh, yes.
What is it, Jamie?
Tied to a tree.
But she... That...
Can't make it out. What's going on?
It's a cannibal feast. I happened to mention to Tippu that I'd once or twice come across the remains of one, but never the beginnings or a middle of one. So the next morning he invited me to accompany him and some of his chaps to a village where a couple of Tippu's men had been doing a bit of slaving. Among their merchandise was a girl of about 11, I suppose, that girl. I bought her from them at Tippu's suggestion for 5 brass rods, and then we took her off to a cannibal chief Tippu knew of, who was told he could have her for lunch on the understanding that I did drawings of him while he was at it. And Tippu got a goat for our supper. To my knowledge, it's the first time the whole process has been recorded. He was my host.
You bought the girl, then watched her being killed and prepared for the pot and cooked and eaten and made sketches of it.
And here, asleep under the tree, that simmers it afterwards.
Yes.
What have you done?
What? Nothing very terrible, surely. The girl had already been caught by slavers. She was bound to end up in the pot. They have no other use for them at that age. Good heavens, we've flogged them to death. We've watched them die by the score. What does it matter? One nigger girl? Yes, I see. I suppose I've slightly lost my curiosity, and the uniqueness of it evidently blinded me to the I'm sorry.
Does Tippu Tib have any of these by any chance?
Some rough versions, yes.
Did you sign them for him?
Yes.
Do you know what he'll do with them? Why, he'll go straight back to the falls and show them around to everyone. The story will be all over the Congo, in England, in London, on the first steamer that we participated in a cannibal, all these months, this year of waiting and hoping, and then just as the end's in sight, you with your damn collection, you bring us down. Oh, it's all been for nothing. Nothing. Worse than nothing. To dishonor, to disgrace. Oh, by God, man. After all this, you've destroyed us. It's worse than death, worse than desertion. Destroyed. Here in England with Stanley, destroyed. Is that why Stanley gave you to me? Because he knew you'd do his work for him, eh? You and Stanley, is that what it was? I told you to stop them. I told you to stop!
Do the same to you, and then come on in here and do the same to us. We'll get him in the morning.
Now perhaps you'll listen to me. Now perhaps we can go home. Go home at last, eh?
Man, have a nibble.
Water. Well, Bonnie, Park is back from the falls with some news. He spoke to Mr. Troop, who is in excellent health and has booked his passage back to Southampton. He is also in excellent voice. His self-justifications and denials have fueled the scandal. God knows what form the story will finally take when it appears in the Times. But it will certainly have precedence with the public over my own poor efforts, eh? Who will want to read of the successful relief of Emin Pasha when there are tales of Bartolot's lash and Jameson's experiments in slaughtering, cooking, and consuming infant girls to wallow in, eh? Mr. Jameson, by the way, is dead. He died at a mission house between here and the falls. He went too fast, in no state to travel. Though, if he'd had quinine with him, he would probably have survived. Why he didn't have quinine is another of the incomprehensible... As there is quinine here, is there not? But let us be charitable and assume that his neglect of himself had something Roman in it. If not Roman, at least English, eh? He was buried by Mr. Ward. Some nonsense about a Union Jack draped over a coffin, rough-hewn from a tree. No doubt a bugle carved on the spot to sound a lament, eh? The good people in the mission were much moved, being ignorant at the time that they were officiating with an opium fiend over the remains of his good friend, the celebrated cannibal.
I can't be sure it was Mr. Ward who took the morphine. All I know is that some is missing.
Mr. Ward left the mission and has completely vanished. You, on the other hand, Barney, are here. The only survivor, in the moral sense, of the Yambuya fiasco. So let us make sure that your reputation is unsullied.
Thank you, sir. I felt somebody had to stay behind and wait until you...
I'm not interested in your motives, Bonnie. One can't plan motives, only results. But there's no planning for a gentleman like Jameson or a maniac like Bartolot. I did my best. I knew him to be a danger to us all. That's why I left him behind in this place where he could do no harm. With an English gentleman to keep a check on him and a set of orders that couldn't have been simpler, clearer, or more flexible.
At least you rescued Emin Pasha.
Who resents it bitterly, being comfortable and probably safe where he was. By the way, Bonnie, where did you bury my John Henry?
Outside the compound with all the other...
Be so kind as to take those damn tortoises to the kitchen, will you? Shut the door, David. Shut the door.